There are moments in history when the world holds its breath, when faith faces fire, when empires descend and ordinary men rise. Summer 1456. At the edge of Europe, one city will decide the fate of a continent. And what happens next? The man known as the Conqueror brings a war machine unlike anything the continent has seen. An empire's wrath is marching north, its eyes fixed on one battered city. Behind the battered walls of Belgrade, surrounded by ruin and despair, only fragments of hope remain. Inside, an aging general calls for one last stand, rallying a mismatched coalition of monks, mercenaries, and farmers. Outnumbered, outmatched, and forsaken by their monarch, Belgrade from existence. And then, as the first cannonballs thunder into stone, the unthinkable happens. The defenders don't yield. Steel meets spirit, fire meets faith, and the desperate last stand turns into something else: defiance. This is more than a siege. This is the moment when a handful of men, armed with courage and conviction, defied an empire and forever changed the course of history. To understand how improbable this victory was, you have to first understand the man who brought war to Belgrade's doorstep. This wasn't just any sultan. This was Mehmed II. Just 3 years earlier, in 1453, at the mere age of 21, he had done what generations of conquerors failed to do. He took Constantinople. The Byzantine capital had stood as a citadel of civilization for over a millennium. Its walls had shrugged off siege after siege, earning it a mythical reputation as the city that could not fall. But Mehmed changed that forever. It wasn't brute force alone. It was vision, strategic brilliance, and most of all, it was his pioneering use of a terrifying new technology: heavy artillery. Cannons capable of smashing stone into dust. He turned the tools of the future against the walls of the past, and won. When Constantinople fell, it wasn't just a city that was conquered. It was an idea, a symbol of Christian endurance. And across Europe, panic spread like wildfire. Mehmed wasn't just a young sultan anymore. He was now Mehmed Fatih. Artillery pieces, including some of the largest siege guns ever forged. Legends say they were cast from the melted bells of conquered churches, a grim transformation of faith into firepower. Whatever their origin, their power was undeniable. These were the same cannons that shattered Constantinople. As this vast force rolled toward Belgrade, there was no secrecy. Europe watched in dread, and few believed the city would survive. Hungary, the kingdom that should have responded, was in disarray. Riven by internal rivalries, its nobles refused to unite or contribute to the defense. Their king, Ladislaus the Posthumous, was a teenager, caught in a web of court politics and ineffective governance. It seemed the realm was sleepwalking into annihilation, but where kings and barons failed, two unlikely men stepped forward. The first was John Hunyadi, a seasoned commander, former regent of Hungary, and the most formidable Ottoman opponent in Europe. For decades, he had battled the Turks across the Balkans, his name whispered with respect and fear alike. He understood the enemy, he understood the stakes, and he knew that if Belgrade fell, Hungary might not recover. But Hunyadi had no army. The nobility wouldn't fund him. So he raised a force with his own fortune, a corps of 10,000 veteran mercenaries and loyal knights. They were professionals, but far too few. The second man was unlike any general. He was a friar, John of Capistrano, a 70-year-old Franciscan preacher sent by the Vatican to root out heresy. Capistrano saw something else more urgent: an existential battle for Christendom. Though frail, he possessed unshakable fire. His sermons blazed with divine fury, preaching in Latin to villagers who could barely understand his words. his passion still ignited crowds. Where Hunyadi built a force with money, Capistrano built one with faith. He called not on nobles, but on peasants, smiths, students, and shepherds. And somehow they came. And so a strange alliance formed, the seasoned warlord and the holy firebrand. Hunyadi, a master of tactics, Capistrano, the soul of a spiritual crusade. Their armies couldn't have been more different. On one side, hardened professionals. On the other, a swelling mass of volunteers, armed with scythes, clubs, and conviction. To the nobles, it looked like a mob. To Capistrano, it was an army of God. As the Ottoman army arrived in July 1456, Belgrade's defenders took their positions. Inside the city, Mihaili Szilagy, Hunyadi's brother-in-law, commanded a garrison of perhaps 5,000 to 7,000 men. Outside the walls, Hunyadi and Capistrano marshaled their combined force of 25,000 to 30,000. The siege began with fury. Ottoman tents blanketed the fields. So many, one chronicler wrote, they looked like snow on the plains. On the Danube, a fleet of over 200 Ottoman ships choked off the city, cutting it from supplies and relief. On July 4th, the bombardment started. The great guns of Mehmed roared day and night. Stones the size of oxen smashed into the city's walls, shaking the earth and battering medieval defenses to ruin. The defenders worked frantically, rebuilding at night, praying at dawn. But the pressure was relentless. The outer fortifications began to crumble. Then Hunyadi made his first move. On July 14th, in a daring naval strike, he launched a ragtag fleet of smaller vessels straight into the Ottoman river blockade. For 5 brutal hours, the river boiled with fire, and against the odds, the Hungarians broke through, capturing dozens of ships and sinking more. Belgrade's lifeline was reopened. Supplies and reinforcements surged into the city, but the real test was yet to come. By July 21st, Mehmed's cannons had done their work. The walls were breached. The time had come. Under the cloak of night, the Janissaries launched their final assault. They surged into the lower town through shattered walls. The defenders gave ground grudgingly, fighting from doorways and alleys. A Turkish flag was raised on a bastion. It looked like the end. Then, Hunyadi turned the city itself into a weapon. He ordered his men to ignite barricades of pitch and wood. Fires roared to life, cutting off the Janissaries from their reinforcements. Trapped in smoke and flame, they were forced into brutal, close-quarters combat. The defenders fought like demons. And in one iconic moment, a soldier named Titus Dugovic is said to have tackled the flag bearer from the walls, dragging both to their deaths to keep the city's morale intact. By morning, the Ottoman assault had failed. And then, the miracle. On July 22nd, a group of Capistrano's crusaders near the Ottoman lines began to skirmish with enemy patrols. It was a rogue action, completely unauthorized. Instead of retreating, more joined, and more. Suddenly, thousands were surging forward. A spontaneous, chaotic charge. Capistrano tried to stop them, but seeing the unbreakable fire in their eyes, he instead seized a crucifix, raised it high, and led them himself. Hunyadi watched in horror. This wasn't the plan. But as the Ottoman lines reeled in shock, he made a split-second decision. He launched his cavalry. The elite Hungarian horsemen burst from the fortress, crashing into the Ottoman flank, cutting toward the siege cannons. Caught between divine madness and professional fury, the Ottoman army shattered. Even Mehmed himself was wounded in the chaos. His invincible force crumbled. The siege was broken. The Sultan withdrew under cover of night, abandoning cannons, tents, and dreams of conquest. Belgrade had held, but the cost was high. In the aftermath, plague swept through the Crusader camp. Within weeks, John Hunyadi, the hero who had orchestrated the defense, was dead. Months later, Capistrano followed. They didn't live to see the peace they had won, but their victory would echo for generations. The Ottomans would not again threaten Hungary for 70 years. The ringing of the noon bell, once a prayer for help, became a celebration of salvation, a tradition that continues to this day in churches around the world. The Siege of Belgrade is more than a footnote in military history. It is a testament to leadership, conviction, and the power of faith-fueled defiance. When the empire came knocking, it wasn't kings who answered, but a soldier, a priest, and a nation of ordinary people with extraordinary courage. And somehow, they won.